Good morning. The minister does get distracted. And welcome to First Parish Northborough. I forget to take the mask off. I'll probably forget to put it back on at the right moment. But I hope on this sun-filled morning, from my perspective, you are all doing as well as you possibly can. I am Reverend Abigail Stockman. I am one of the co-interim ministers here at First Parish, along with Reverend Misty Dawn Shelley, who will actually be here in 2 weeks. So I hope you'll all make a point of being here for that wonderful service or online. You are welcome here, whether you are on Zoom or whether you are in our meeting house. We are a liberal religious faith community gathered in covenant. And if you wish to learn more about Unitarian Universalism, please feel free to contact myself or Reverend Misty Dawn, and we'd be happy to speak with you and offer you some reading material or whatever way of learning is most comfortable for you. And will you begin our prelude? I'm gonna ding. Our call to worship this morning are the words of Reverend Erica Hewitt, read by Ann Morrissey and Chris Woodcock. You will hear a refrain in this call to worship that I will participate in, and when you are so moved, please feel free to join out loud or in your heart. The refrain is, "We speak the language of love."
We arrive from many different experiences and backgrounds. Some of us have trouble speaking. Others are so young that they're still learning to talk. Some of us speak English as a second language, and others of us can speak several foreign languages. All of us share this in common.
We speak the language of love.
In the moments before worship begins, and again, when we return to the service of life, we greet one another with kind words. We chat about the days behind us and the days to come, and we lift our voices in song, not to sing perfectly or in tune, but to hear and feel our voices form a life-giving sound. And
we speak the language of love.
We form a web of compassionate listening when individuals among us, embodying vulnerability, name the fears that grip their hearts, the joys that buoy their spirits.
We speak the language of love. At times, our voices clash. We disagree. Tension enters our voices as we make room for different beliefs, different opinions, different perspectives. Through it all, it's our intention that
we speak the language of love.
In this congregation, we welcome a multiplicity of truths and invite them to be named out loud. We prophesy, summoning the age when justice and peace will be evident all around us, and
we speak the language of love.
Let us worship together, making room for one another as whole beings, tender hearts, hungry spirits, and curious minds. With our actions and with our words, let us
speak the language of love. We light this chalice to illuminate the language of love as it speaks in the ordinary, the everyday, the extraordinary, as it speaks in our actions as well as in our words, within, among, between, and beyond. Please rise in body or spirit. Please rise in spirit, body as you are able. We should all rise in spirit and sing number 42, Morning So Fair to See. the words to that from one of our ministers in the early 20th century, Vincent Silliman.
One moment. You learn when you're on crutches that there's an extra 5 steps for everything you do. And that's okay. All right, good morning. I'm Cynthia Menard, the Director of Education for First Parish, and I have for our Time for All Ages this morning a familiar story. There once was an emperor who loved nothing better than wearing fancy new clothes. 3 times a day, he would change into a brand new royal outfit. Many emperors spent their days talking to advisors and fixing problems of the land. Not this one. He was too busy sending out his servants to find the next great outfit to wear. One day, 2 strangers came to town. They said they were weavers. They said the cloth they wove was the finest that anyone would see. In fact, they were actually not weavers. They were crooks. These fake weavers said their cloth was more beautiful than any other cloth, but it could not be seen by just anyone. No, only people who were smart and the most excellent would actually see the magical cloth. People who were not smart and not excellent, well, they would see nothing at all. Soon, word reached the emperor about these 2 weavers and their fine, fine cloth. He thought, I am the most smart and excellent emperor anyone can tell just by how grand I always look. I don't need that silly magic. It doesn't bother me. So the emperor went to see the 2 weavers. These clever crooks ran about their shop, pointing at empty corners and tables, and they said with pride, look at these fine piles of cloth. Surely you've never seen colors as bright as these, or patterns that are this beautiful. The emperor could not understand. He didn't see any cloth anywhere. The emperor thought, I cannot let anyone know that I cannot see this magical cloth. Who knows what they might think of me? So instead he said, indeed, this is the most beautiful cloth anyone has ever seen. As it turns out, the emperor's grand annual parade was coming up soon. This was a special day in the kingdom when everyone lined up to admire the emperor and cheer him as he walked by. This year, the emperor wanted an outfit more fine than ever before. It must be made from the world's most wondrous cloth. Yet there was very little time. Could they weave the cloth in time for the parade? The 2 fake weavers frowned as if they could not be sure. Then they smiled and said, well, yes, they could make him the finest royal outfit and cape ever, but it would cost much, much more gold for the work to be ready in time. The emperor paid for it all. The 2 crooks put the gold right into their chest. They did not buy yarn. All they bought were a few candles to put in the window at night. That way everyone would say, look how hard those new weavers are working all night long to get the emperor's new clothes ready for the parade. In the morning of the parade, the emperor came to the weaver's shop. He felt sure that this time he would be able to see the magic cloth. But still, the emperor saw nothing. When it was time for the emperor to get undressed, the clever crooks said, these clothes are so light and airy, it will feel as if you have nothing on at all. And indeed, that is how it seemed to the emperor. For when he looked in the mirror, he saw that in his reflection, he was wearing nothing. But he thought, really, he must be wearing a grand outfit, one worth all the extra money that he had spent. At the parade, the emperor walked tall and proud. Each person who saw him go by thought, I cannot believe what I am seeing. The emperor is wearing a clothes. But each person said nothing. They knew that only people who were smart and excellent could see the clothes. So instead they cheered. There goes the emperor, doesn't he look fine? All of a sudden, one little boy called out, look, the emperor has no clothes. And then somebody else said, look at him. He has nothing on at all. This too was another child. And then somebody laughed, and someone else. And then more and more people started to laugh, and someone said aloud, would you look at that? Our emperor has no clothes. Soon everyone was calling out and laughing. Oh dear, thought the emperor. Now everyone knows that I could not see the cloth, and they will know I didn't speak up because I was afraid of what people would think of me. What will they think of me now? But the parade must go on, and so the emperor continued to walk, and the servants behind him continued to hold high the train that wasn't there. I wonder when in your life you may have been so worried about what others thought of you that you hid your personal truth. And I'm also wondering when in your life your truth may have become more important than others' perceptions.
Who knew fairy tales could be sacred material? Thank you, Cynthia. As we contemplate those moments when we may have betrayed who we were, so others would think better of us, or so we thought, or those moments where we spoke up no matter what about who we were, let us enter into a time of prayer and reflection. We begin with these words this morning from Tracy Cotran, and then we will have a sung meditation. The choir will begin, and we will join in. Olga will tell us when to join in. And I want to remind you that as in our opening words, this is not a singing performance. This is an opportunity to meditate with sound and vibration. And so let us enter into that openness and spirit with one another, placing our feet, if we wish, on the floor and deepening our breath and centering into our own bodies. O Spirit of compassion, teach us to consider also how others experience the world, to understand how my reality and their reality are different, and yet they share qualities of the same core desire. Teach us, O Holy One, to listen for shared feelings, for places of connection. Teach us to be curious and open to hearing differences, to love into brokenness, to give space for, to be patient with healing. Let us be strong in our vulnerability, in our not knowing, in exposing our less than perfect, scary bits to those in front of us. Help us find courage to face judgment, scorn, and hatred because of the greater good. May we be disciples of essential goodness, strong in our knowing that in each being there is a divine light of the soul. Give us strength, Holy She, to keep feeling empathy, even when we are tired and broken. For it is then that you are feeling the empathy through us. Amen. We'll have a moment of silence as the choir comes forward and begins our chant. Open my heart to all that I seek. Let me be part of the love you give.
So the choir will sing it through twice, and afterwards we'll provide a little bit of a melody, and you just chant the words in any pace you like. Slowly, fastly, just provide the chant for us, okay? That will be beautiful, beautiful experience.
wanting to put the mask on. Our readings this morning are two. The first one is a little short poem, and I'll tell you a little more about this, but I was made to memorize this poem as a young child of probably about 6 or 7, as were all my classmates. Trees by Joyce Kilmer. If you know it, please join in. I think that I shall never see a poem lovely as a tree whose hungry mouth is pressed against the earth's sweet flowing breast, a tree that looks at God all day and lifts her leafy arms to pray, a tree that may in summer wear a nest of robins in her hair, upon whose bosom snow has lain, who intimately lives with rain. Poems are made by fools like me, but only God can make a tree. The second reading comes from the mystic poet, the mystic 15th century poet, Kabir. Kabir lived in what we now call India, and he greatly influenced the religions of Hinduism, Islam, and Sikhism. The guest is inside you and also inside me. You know the sprout is hidden in the seed. We are all struggling. None of us has gone far. Let your arrogance go and look around inside. The blue sky opens out farther and farther. The daily sense of failure goes away. The damage I have done to myself fades. A million suns come forward with light. When I sit firmly in that world, I hear bells ringing that no one has shaken. Inside love, there is more joy than we know of. Rain pours down, although the sky is clear of clouds, there are whole rivers of light. The universe is shot through in all parts by a single sort of love. How hard it is to feel that joy in all our 4 bodies. Those who hope to be reasonable about it will fail. The arrogance of reason has separated us from that love. The word reason, you already feel miles away. How lucky Kabir is, surrounded by all this joy. He sings inside his own little boat. His poems amount to one soul meeting another. These songs are about forgetting, dying, and loss. They rise above both coming in and going out. Thus ends the reading. The offering for the work of this congregation, First Parish of Northborough, will now be, we hope, graciously given. It will be graciously received. Half of the plate collection this morning goes to Abby's house in Worcester, organization that has served many, many women over the years, as well as children, and provided homes, provided shelter, helped train people for jobs, and connected them with resources. And while we give our offering, the choir has an offering for us as well. Laudate omnia, praise everything. Sing graciously. Because we were all made to memorize this program sometime, this poem, the Trees poem, early in elementary school, for years I thought we were made to memorize it because Joyce Kilmer had lived in the town where I grew up. He didn't. He lived in New Jersey, which to those of us in New York, just over the border, thought was really another country. And my parents were all on board with memorizing this poem and many of the other books of poetry that they introduced me to as a small child. And I think I probably told you before that my parents were active and faithful attenders and leaders in my childhood faith community. But maybe I haven't told you that they were also religious humanists and militant atheists. More than once, I heard my mother exclaim things that now embarrass me about someone they knew, such as, "They're such a bright person," or at least I thought so why do they go to church and pray? Judgment and intolerance marked my mother's liberalism. And it also indicated to me never to dare to have my own ideas, feelings, and beliefs, even as a small child, expressed out loud about God, because she would undoubtedly shame me for that. I never really understood why my parents thought it was so important that I learn poetry. And for those of you who have young children, if you are indeed a militant atheist, and I say this tongue-in-cheek, if you are hoping to raise atheists, do not let them near poetry. Learning that poem helped me to appreciate the trees around me as something more than a very tall jungle gym to be climbed on, as something more than a way to escape from the inside of the house, from all the children on the ground, to a place alone. Branches and trunks gave me an escape from life's drama, but it was also a sacred place to go and to think, to be quiet, to be alone with the mystery for which the only language I'd been given as a child was in those poems, and it was God. In the spring, summer, and autumn, the trees provided a hiding place. I understand trees to be sacred today. I understood them to be sacred as a child, though I had little understanding of what mystery and sacred meant or were. But to this day, I choose, and I've heard many of you say similarly, that you have made choices to live where I am surrounded by trees. In my case, not so much people, just trees. They are companions on my life's journey. We witness together, the trees and I, the passing of life within and around one another. I cannot help but notice life's toll on the trees, the broken branches, the invasion of insects, the rising of the sap in the spring. And the trees are my confessor. They listen to my prayers, those spoken aloud, those whispered, and those sitting silently in my heart, offered to the universe. I have a dear friend, and it used to be when she came to visit us, she would make a very quick stop through the household to say hello and go immediately to this big, huge, old copper beech in that yard and give it a hug before she returned to spend time with us. I think I shall never see a poem lovely as a tree. Perhaps this was just a piece of poetic arrogance on the part of Joyce Kilmer to create a lovely little rhyming poem about the source of creation, one that falls off the tongue like gravity pulls apples to the ground when they fall off the branch. I love poetry and have simply come to understand that both poetry and trees evoke the holy, each in its own manner. Perhaps you have a similar understanding. Back to those trees upon whose bosom snow has lain, who intimately live with rain. I marvel in the middle of a Vermont winter at the ability of trees to stand bare naked, totally exposed to the elements in the late autumn and winter. I marveled equally when I lived along the eastern coast at the trees that were buffeted by nor'easters, unrelenting winds, rain that fell feeling like shards of glass. In one place that I lived, there was in the yard a pre-Civil War maple. It was the last one standing, alone on the top of a rise, not quite a hill. It was so stark in winter on that rise. There was nothing to break the cold wind, no protection from the late autumn sharp ice, no warm fire when the temperatures plunged as they did then to 20 and 30 below zero at night. I would often wonder what it would be like for me to stand there so naked to the elements. Gary Schmidt wrote, "The relentless, piteous winter weather highlights our frailty before the larger forces of the natural world. And it particularly highlights the vulnerability of those who are poor, dispossessed, or struggling on the outskirts of their culture and society." To be so exposed and to be so vulnerable. It is a common human fear to not want to stand alone, exposed. Not just to the elements of nature, but to the elements of human nature. Ridicule, shame, to be outcast. Perhaps those of you who, like me, had professions where you stood up in public, in a classroom, in public speaking. It is a typical nightmare that one has of showing up to that important event naked, or with your underwear showing, or without your notes or written speech, and of having others shame and ridicule you for that. This is what we fear as human beings. This is what the emperor feared, and all the people who pretended to see the cloth feared. Which was worse? That you get caught out not seeing the cloth and be deemed not worthy, or pretending you saw the cloth and going along with everyone. In a fairy tale, it seems far-fetched. But in our daily lives, it isn't. And we're constantly put in those positions. I think of a couple of instances in my own life. One as a child. I had a piano teacher whom I loved and adored. And I was a young, what do they call it, preteen. And the neighboring family up the street who had just moved in, their daughters went to the same piano teacher. And one day I was babysitting for the family, and the mother came home and she asked me, what I thought of my piano teacher, with whom I had tea after lessons. I mean, she was my substitute mother, as most preteens have substitute parents of some sort. And I said how much I loved her, and this mother, this adult, went on to tell me how much she didn't think my teacher was a very good teacher, and how her daughters were not going to stay her students. So one day in the future, but not the far future, I'm having tea with my piano teacher who, I don't remember what happened, but I spilled the beans, right? I spilled the beans. I was 12 or 13 years old. How could somebody not love my beloved piano teacher? And of course, at some point, the piano teacher let the mother know that she knew. And the mother came at me with a wagging finger. Are you feeling shamed yet? If you're not, I'm going to wag both my fingers. And thank you for the healing in your prayers. My hand is healed, no cast anymore. So, wagging fingers at me, she told me I couldn't keep a secret and I didn't know how to be discreet. She was absolutely right. But it was 20 years before I stopped fighting with that voice in my head, the voice of shame. You cannot keep a secret, and you are not discreet. 20 years, I let that voice tell me who I was. We all have vulnerable moments in life where somebody says something, whether they intend to or not, that is hurtful and that is shaming. And shame is a physical, bodily response, by the way. It has nothing to do with what we're thinking, though it does inform our thinking. We go so self-protective in the moment that we feel shame that our brain shuts down to anything but self-protective talk. What a bad mother she was, what a terrible person, I was just a kid, she was an adult. But we're all just doing the best we can in any moment, aren't we? But shame so often stops us from growing. It took me 20 years to one day be telling myself the story that I'd been telling myself ever since the day she said that to me, that I'm really a bad person. There's something really deeply that was born in me wrong, that I couldn't keep a secret, and that I was not discreet, and that I could never do anything that might require those skills. Notice, by the way, it is a quality one needs for ministry. I wasn't a minister yet. To begin to ask myself some other questions, like to get curious. What was going on for her? What was going through her mind? How shamed might she have felt when the piano teacher mentioned that she knew? By the way, nobody in this story is wrong. There is no blame in this story, except when you're feeling shame. When there's shame, everybody's wrong, except for me. You think that's funny, right? But when we feel shame and we start telling ourselves the story about how everyone else is to blame, we are the only one not to blame in that story. So I began to ask, what was going on for her? What was going on for those young girls? What was going on for my piano teacher that she felt the need to say that? And what was going on with me, who needed to take it on at 12 years old, that there was something so deeply wrong with me and so broken it could never be fixed? As a colleague friend of mine says, it's a good thing God loves you. Now I know we don't all, that is not something we share as Unitarian Universalists. The word God may be meaningless for many people. But I will say it's a good thing that love, larger than any one of us, larger than any one thing we are or we do, beyond the boundaries of our lives and time and space exists. Because we need to call on that love to help us get curious when we feel shame in the middle of vulnerability. Because on the other side of that, vulnerability is this wonderful possibility. And if we can learn to become more vulnerable with one another, then we're doing our work of spiritual growth. Then we're doing our work of trying to become aspiring toward beloved community. And it's not easy work. It's hard work. We don't want to be vulnerable with one another, most especially those of us who identify with the dominant culture. Most especially for those of us who have what these days we call some level of privilege. Educational or financial or food security, water security, shelter security. We may be neurotypical, we may be physically typical in our abilities. All those things make us more vulnerable to not wanting to be vulnerable. Because underneath them, Brené Brown, whose book Rising Strong I highly recommend and I've been reading this week, underneath all of that, Brené Brown says, is that we are all needy. We are all needy. But the more privilege we have, the more we tell ourselves a story about how we don't need others. I'm a poster child for this. I had a boyfriend in college one day. I was getting out of the car, I had 3 bags of groceries, I had a stack of books this high and, 3 carry bags. And he said, "Can I help you?" I said, "Absolutely not, I can do this by myself." And he let me. He'd spent too many times wrestling with me, trying to get all those things out of my hands. It was a good lesson. The Episcopal theologian Carter Haywood wrote, "For despite the despicable occasion that triggered it, vulnerability need not be a debilitating psycho-spiritual or social condition. At its root, vulnerability is about openness, not weakness. Openness to our need for one another, openness to our mutuality. Vulnerability and mutuality are rich spiritual soil. I would say they can be, if we allow them. Or vulnerability can lead to 5 police officers killing 1 man because they feel vulnerable and need to prove they're not weak. If we stay stuck in the shame, if we can't find a way to get curious, we stay stuck in the vulnerability and spend our lives protecting ourselves with magical cloth from letting other people see our neediness. And it's not easy work. I don't pretend to stand up here and tell you that I can do this or that I always know how. I can only tell you that this is what we commit to as a faith community. And I invite you to take the risk of exploring what it's like to not need the magical cloth. To know that underneath we all have underwear. And that we are all doing the best we can on any day. And like the trees, maybe our vulnerability in the face of storms and hurt and difficulty gives us the strength in time, to rise the sap from our core of being, to reach for the sun and to sprout beautiful clothing like wings, like leaves and wings. So may it be. Amen. Bless you for your patience this morning. Our closing hymn is number 1059 in this turquoise. May your life be as a song. It is another possible round, but let us just sing it through 4 times.
We'll see, yeah. We'll see. May your life be as a song, resounding with the dawn, to sing with the light, and softly serenade the stars, ever dancing circles in the night. May your life be as a song, may your life be as a song, may your life be as a song, may your
let us return to the service of life. May we go forward with open hearts. May we consider curiosity when we are feeling vulnerable. And may we be well. May we love and do our best. Amen. Go forward.